The last thing my mother said before hanging up the phone was, "As long as you're married to him, don't consider us your family anymore." 3 years later, I opened my front door and found my parents standing on my porch with suitcases in their hands. My father couldn't even look me in the eye. And my mother, the same woman who had called my marriage a sin, whispered the words I never thought I'd hear. "We need your help." My name is Caroline Mercer. I was 34 years old, worked as a pediatric physical therapist, and had spent most of my life trying to fit inside a version of myself my parents found acceptable. I grew up in a deeply religious household. My parents had strict beliefs about everything. How women should behave. Who they should marry. What their lives should look like. My younger sister, Rebecca, embraced that life completely. She attended the church my parents loved. Dated men they approved of. Volunteered at every community event. She was the daughter people praised during Sunday lunches. I was different. I asked questions. I wanted independence. I moved to another city after college. And eventually, I fell in love with Noah. Noah wasn't reckless. He wasn't disrespectful. He wasn't cruel. He was kind. Patient. Loyal. The problem? He came from a different religious background. To my parents, that overshadowed everything else. The first time I introduced Noah to them, dinner became unbearable. Dad barely spoke. Mom forced polite smiles. The moment Noah stepped outside to answer a phone call, Mom turned to me. "You cannot be serious." I stared at her. "I love him." She folded her napkin carefully. "Love isn't enough." "What does that mean?" "It means people should marry within their faith." I felt my chest tighten. Noah respects my beliefs. Dad finally spoke. "That's not the point." It became the point for the next 2 years. Every family gathering turned into an interrogation. Every phone call became another warning. Meanwhile, Rebecca announced her engagement. Mom cried tears of joy. Dad toasted to God's perfect plan. Then came the first betrayal. A month before Rebecca's wedding, my parents invited me over. "We've decided to help Rebecca and Michael buy their first home," Dad announced proudly. Mom beamed. "We're giving them $80,000. I blinked. $80,000? Dad nodded. "We've been saving for years." A strange ache settled in my chest. Because years earlier, when Noah and I struggled with medical bills after his surgery, my parents had refused to help. "We don't support sinful choices," Mom had said. Now they were celebrating Rebecca's future with a check larger than Noah and I earned in an entire year. I swallowed hard. "I'm happy for Rebecca." Mom looked relieved. "Thank you for understanding." "Then she ruined it." "You could have had this too." I stared at her. "What? If you'd made better choices." I left before dinner was served. Months later, Noah and I had a small wedding ceremony surrounded by friends who genuinely loved us. My parents didn't attend. Neither did Rebecca. Instead, Mom mailed me a card. Inside, she'd written, "I hope one day you find your way back to God." No congratulations. No well wishes. Nothing. I cried for hours. Noah held me while I grieved people who were still alive. 3 years passed. Noah's health improved. My career flourished. We bought a modest house. Created traditions. Built peace. Then my phone rang. It was Rebecca. I hadn't heard her voice in months. "Caroline." Something sounded wrong. "What's happened?" She burst into tears. Michael had been secretly gambling. The $80,000 my parents had gifted them was gone. The house had accumulated additional debt. Foreclosure proceedings had begun. "What?" I whispered. "I didn't know," Rebecca sobbed. He lied. The golden marriage my parents had celebrated was falling apart. Then came twist number 1. Rebecca confessed that Mom and Dad had emptied much of their retirement savings trying to rescue her family financially. They'd refinanced their home, taken out loans, sacrificed everything. And it still wasn't enough. For the first time, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction. Fear. 2 weeks later, there was another knock at my door. I opened it and froze. Mom and Dad stood outside carrying luggage. Mom looked exhausted. Dad appeared years older. "We lost the house," Dad admitted quietly. I couldn't breathe. "What?" Mom started crying. "We didn't know where else to go." The irony crashed over me all at once. The daughter whose marriage they had condemned now owned the only safe home available to them. Noah stepped forward beside me. "We should let them in." I looked at him in disbelief. After everything they'd done? But that's who Noah was. Compassionate even when people didn't deserve it. Living together wasn't easy. Mom criticized our routines. Dad avoided difficult conversations. The tension was suffocating. Then came twist number 2. One evening, I overheard my parents arguing. "This is your fault," Dad snapped. Mom looked stunned. "You encouraged Rebecca to ignore warning signs. You approved of Michael too. You pushed Caroline away." I stood frozen outside the kitchen. Dad's voice cracked. "Noah was a good man from the beginning." Silence followed. Then Mom whispered something that shattered me. I thought I was protecting our family. The certainty she'd carried for decades was finally crumbling. A few days later, Rebecca arrived unexpectedly. She looked exhausted. Her divorce had begun. She sat across from me at the kitchen table. "I used to envy you," she admitted. I blinked. "What?" "You married someone who loved you." Tears filled her eyes. "I married someone everyone approved of." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. For years, I'd resented Rebecca. But she had also been trapped by expectations she never questioned. Then came twist number 3. Mom found the box. Inside were all the letters she'd mailed me over the years. Letters I'd never opened. I had kept them sealed. She picked one up slowly. "You never read these?" I shook my head. "They all hurt." Mom started crying. Real crying. The kind that leaves people unable to hide. "I thought I was guiding you. You were rejecting me." The words hung heavily between us. Eventually, the climax arrived. Dad asked if we could talk privately. "I owe Noah an apology. He found Noah in the backyard. I judged you unfairly." Noah looked surprised. "You didn't know me." Dad nodded. "I should have tried." Then he said something I never expected. "You've treated my daughter better than I ever did." Noah glanced toward me through the kitchen window. "I love her." Dad's eyes filled with tears. "I know." Months passed. My parents found a small apartment nearby. Rebecca finalized her divorce and started rebuilding her life. Nothing magically returned to normal. Some damage leaves permanent marks. But healing began in honest conversations. Boundaries. Accountability. One Sunday afternoon, Mom invited Noah and me to lunch. Halfway through the meal, she reached for my hand. I was wrong. The restaurant fell silent in my mind. I allowed fear to become judgment. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I chose doctrine over compassion. I squeezed her hand gently. "You hurt me." "I know. I can't pretend it didn't happen." She nodded. "I don't expect that." Then she whispered, "Thank you for giving us another chance." I looked across the table. At the woman who had once called my marriage sinful. At the father who had once refused to attend my wedding. At Noah, who had shown grace none of us deserved. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing what pain gets to control your future. A year later, Noah and I celebrated our anniversary at home. Mom brought dessert. Dad helped fix our fence. Rebecca laughed while teaching our niece how to bake cookies. At one point, Mom pulled me aside. "You know something?" "What?" "The life I feared for you." She looked around the room. "Became the one I admire most." I smiled through tears. Because the little girl who had desperately chased her parents' approval would never have believed this ending. The parents who gave my sister $80,000 but condemned my marriage eventually lost everything they thought defined success. Status. Appearances. Certainty. And when life stripped those things away, they discovered something humbling. The daughter they had rejected had built a home strong enough to offer grace without surrendering self-respect. Noah slipped his hand into mine. "You okay?" he whispered. I looked around at the messy, complicated people I loved. "I think so. Because karma isn't always revenge. Sometimes karma is forcing people to confront the consequences of their choices. And sometimes healing begins when the person you underestimated refuses to become the person you expected." My parents once called my marriage a sin. Now, every Sunday, they sat at our dinner table surrounded by the family they almost lost. And I think that frightened them far more than punishment ever could. Because love had succeeded where judgment failed. And there was no sermon powerful enough to deny that truth.